Gray Box podcast interview time with my friend Brad. Brad is a good friend of mine, one of my best friends. And I've wanted to have him on the podcast ever since I started this thing. And the reason I wanted him on is because I wanted to talk to him about two primary things: loss, and then really loss of faith in a religious setting. He lost his father at a young age, was essentially raised without a father. And I wanted to go through that with him. I lost my father when I was 20, and so I wanted to just kind of relate with him a little bit and talk to him about what it was like to be raised without a father. I have some feelings with him as far as losing someone close to you, but our experiences were totally different. And so I wanted to get his experience. His father, he lost through tragic circumstances. And I wanted to get his take on that and how it shaped him as he grew up and how it shapes him now. And also, I wanted to talk to him about being all in religion and in faith, and then essentially getting to a point where you're excommunicated from that faith. And I wanted to go through that. So this is a really, I say special podcast because it's my good buddy. And I'm just glad he was able to open up and talk and share his story. And I think you can get something from it, as with all these podcasts, and especially the interview portions of it. I'm trying to get people on that we can learn from, relate to, and perhaps grow from those experiences. And also, it's really interesting to hear about other people's lives. So that's why we do this thing. So anyway, it is Brad, my good buddy, and here's our sit down on the Gray Box podcast.
But I think it'd be interesting to talk about growing up without a dad, and then how that kind of shaped
who I am,
who you are. Because I lost my dad when I was 20.
Yep.
I think 2021. But how old were you?
I was 5.
So you don't really remember it?
No. I remember bits and pieces. It was December. And I don't remember if we were my dad had been struggling with depression. He had been on and off some medications to help.
And how do you know this? Just talking to your family?
Yeah, it's pulling teeth for my family. We don't talk openly about stuff like this too often. Allie and I do. Allie's I have 2 sisters, 2 older sisters. Allie's the closest to me. She's 3 years older than I am. And then Jenny, my oldest sister. Little bits and pieces just through life. I'd hear little additions to the situation. You know, my grandma's sister, she passed away. It's probably been 15 years now, maybe more, maybe close to 20, but her and her sister were really close. So her sister has now become our grandma. She's still around. And she was very close to the situation. And she oftentimes brings up little tidbits like, oh, that doctor, he took him off the medication cold turkey. And I think that was really detrimental.
Do you know what he was on?
I don't. No.
Just antidepressants, maybe?
Yeah. That's from what I understand.
So this would have been back in the 80s?
89.
I don't know what was popular back then, but maybe Prozac, and who knows, but
who knows, right?
Yeah.
I mean, 25 years in medical technology advances a lot.
Yeah.
So I don't know what they were doing back then. I know that my mom was frustrated as well. She says that a lot of times they would go in and talk to doctors together, and he would, let them know, hey, I'm just feeling sad, not feeling myself. And they would basically just say, hey, feel happy, don't feel a different way. And it just wasn't hitting.
I think that's maybe where we've advanced a little bit in society. Like we actually take people's sadness, their anxieties, their depression, and say, that's valid.
Yeah.
And let's talk about how to.
Not as taboo now.
Yeah. Now it's like, back then, if you're a male with family, you just
suck it up. Yeah.
Bootstrap it, just deal with it.
Seems like it, and like I said, I wasn't that close to the situation there as far as understanding what the medical history is behind his depression and kind of what led up to ultimately him taking his life.
So that's how he died.
That's how he died.
How did he do it?
He initially tried a different way. I think it was leaving the car in the garage. And I could be wrong.
This is according to you from a closed family.
This is, yes, very closed family. Hearing mixed things throughout 25 years, 30 years.
Trying to parse it together.
Yeah. So from what I understand, he was doing that, and our neighbor saw him and saved him, ultimately, kind of stopped him. And then shortly after, he ended up using a gun and did it that way. And
at the house?
He was gone. He wasn't at the house. I don't know where he was. We were at this party, and, in fact, I just found this out this year. My grandma, he's an only child. So my grandma and her husband, they were at this point divorced. So she had him and us, basically. That was her family. We would always go visit grandma. She lived in Kaysville. And I found out that same night she had a heart attack as well, as soon as she found out. And she wasn't at the hospital because she was getting her own treatment. Her sister's husband, Gary, at the time, came over with a couple of his sons they felt like uncles to me. They were my great cousins, or whatever that is. I don't know. And anyways, they came over, they grabbed us. We were at a Christmas party. They're supposed to be bringing Santa over. They pulled us out of the Christmas party, took us home, and we had kind of the talk of, hey, something's bad happened to Dad. And, it looks like he's going to die. And we're going to take you to the hospital now to be able to see him one last time. And basically the hospital kept him on life support, I think, up until we could say goodbye, but he was basically gone already. I remember I don't remember really from there until right before the room where I was going to go in and see him. And they asked me, do you want to go see him? And I'm 5, of course I want to go see my dad. Yeah.
Probably because you don't really relate him being dead.
No, it's not hitting.
Yeah, let's go see Dad.
It's not hitting. So,
but you've got 2 older sisters that are like probably reeling it right now, feeling it probably more than you are for sure.
Yes.
And Mom, of course.
Yes. And since, my oldest sister, Jenny, she's told me that was so traumatic for her. It was just major trauma.
How old was she? 12?
She was 12. 11. Almost 12. Yeah, something like that. 10 or 11. So I go in, he's got all these head bandages on, and my eyes just kind of not there.
Yeah.
Back and forth kind of stuff. And I remember I can still see it now, just seeing him. And that was it. Walk back out. Everybody's kind of crying. I'm not really getting it. I'm sure I'm crying too, but not really getting it. And that changed our lives forever. From what I didn't know this, but I guess shortly after we went to California to be with my mom's family, and we were there for about 3 months, which I didn't know. I completely don't remember any of that. Came back. My mom tells this story often, that when we pulled into the driveway of our house, she felt this overwhelming sense of, like, this is home. This is where you're supposed to be. And so she's always taken that as such a major impression in her life and a major message in her life. And so we did. We just started moving forward without him, and I mean, it's interesting. I've done a little bit of research since, talked to many a therapist since, and they say that when you're that young and you go through that significant of trauma, that essentially your brain kind of starts over. It doesn't know how to process that. So that's why I think a lot of those memories are just missing.
Mm-hmm.
It's just too much. So my brain says, let's hit the reset button.
Start over again.
This is your new life. Here you go.
So you don't, I mean, we talked about this before, but like, you don't feel the same sense of loss directly correlated from him dying.
Mm-hmm.
It's more later on when you start like developing and coming into your own, where
missing that influence. I think I for a long time, up until recently, I'd say in the last 10 years, I always thought I was kind of lucky because I didn't miss him. I didn't know what that was like. It was just, this is my life.
Yeah.
And I still don't know what it's like to have a dad.
Yeah.
To have that person in your life that is whatever, the protector or whatever you want to,
your basketball
whatever
games,
it is.
your football
Yes.
games, the
Any
whole
of it.
bit.
Any of it, right? So I guess I didn't realize what that loss of influence was going to mean in my life. And now as I'm getting older, I'm starting to realize how influential that position is. And now I have no doubt that I've been heavily affected by it in a lot of ways, and some good, some bad. But mostly, I think humans, we all have different influences, and he could have been a bad influence in my life. Maybe he was going down a route that would have been completely negative.
Yeah, you don't know.
I don't know. So I can't say one way or another how my life would be changed now, but I know it would be changed in some way.
It would certainly be different.
Yeah.
When did you have to deal with it? Was there a point in your life where you're like, okay, I'm feeling this, I got to deal with it? Or because you said about 10 years ago is when you started to kind of like, okay.
Yeah. So I started going through a lot in life. And part of that was a divorce, which ultimately led to a lot of self-reflection, self-discovery. And it's during that time that I really started to dive deeper into the effects. And I remember in particular, one therapist I was seeing asked me about it and said, tell me, about your parents and their history. So I told him, and he kind of says, Brad, of course you're going to have some implications from that. And he just kind of, I don't know why, it was kind of an epiphany for me that was like, oh, you know what? You're right. Logically, you're going to be affected by it. And I need to accept that those effects have happened, are happening, will continue to happen, and have more of an open mind to that versus being like, no, I'm okay. You know, I never felt it.
I was 5. It's fine. It was harder for my mom and my sisters than me.
Yes.
It's not as hard for me as it was for them.
Mm-hmm. And give her a lot of credit to my mom, because I feel like she did her best to step up in those roles as best she could. She was at all my games. You know, she was outside sometimes shooting hoops with me. And, it let me put jazz posters on my wall and really like getting into sports with me like that. You know what I mean? So I think she was doing the best she could.
Yeah.
As trying to fill that gap. But
do you think therapy helped?
Yeah, I think therapy helped in so many ways. Mostly learning how to have a different perspective with yourself, how to look at yourself from an outside perspective. We're always so absorbed in our lives and our problems and what do I have today and what do I got to do and what do I want? And it really taught me, and I still struggle with this. We all do, but it just taught me to look at myself differently, have a little bit more compassion for myself, especially when I didn't feel like I deserved any compassion. And it opened my eyes to mental health as well, which was very therapeutic for understanding my dad's position more and not being so black and white with that.
Yeah. You've talked about this before. Do you feel like you and your dad had or have similarities, even though you weren't necessarily raised by him?
Yeah. I mean, the mannerisms.
Yeah.
We look identical, except he was more tan. I got my mom's skin there. Yeah.
That's funny because
I don't know what else really, it's kind of hard to say.
It's the same for me. I mean, my dad died when I was 20. Anyway. And we look exactly the same. We do a lot of the same things and a lot of the same mannerisms as I'm getting older. Mm-hmm. And he's been gone for years. Mm-hmm. And it's still like there.
Yep.
It's really weird.
Yeah, I like to look at it now. I mean, whenever I see somebody that's off the beaten path, or maybe, I don't know, people want to call them troubled or whatever you want to say, I always ask, what are their parents up to?
Yeah.
Because to me, it's a direct correlation. It's a direct correlation. We absorb information all day long. It's just who we are as beings. And most all of that information, especially at an early age, is all from our parents or siblings. And so it's just so heavily influenced there that there's really you can veer off here and there, but I guarantee if we all look back 30 years from now, when we're our parents' age now, we're going to say, crazy.
Yeah.
Spin image.
Absolutely.
And I feel like I have to be more aware now of possible depression, keeping an eye on it, trying to at least.
Have you felt depressed other than in more extraordinary experiences in your life or times like divorce, things like that? Have you noticed yourself getting depressed more chemically, like where you almost can't control it? Yeah.
Right. No.
Yeah.
Thankfully. Because, this year, I think it was this year, I passed my dad's age when he died. I'm now older than he was when he died.
Wow.
Which is a trip.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
So I'm kind of thinking now, it's really put things into perspective as far as what was he going through? What was he feeling? He had 3 young kids. He had wife. He seemingly looked like he was doing well with work and progressing that way. Like, what was going on, And I just have a lot more sympathy for him.
Well, and the thing you can think about too is now that we're your dad's age, it's like you can understand the pressure
Mm-hmm.
of like being a husband or father or work or entrepreneur or having a boss this way or having a job that way or all these things, house, mortgage, all these things. And you can start to put yourself in in our parents' shoes and say, wow, like I kind of understand
Yeah.
what they were going through and kind of get into their head space.
Yep.
Where younger, it's hard.
You have zero idea. You haven't had to go out and earn it for yourself. You haven't had to survive. You haven't had to pay rent or pay a mortgage. You haven't had to come up with this constant, there's a constant pressure to progress or to do something or to
have
whatever,
this or have that or always upward mobility.
I can see how easy it is to get stuck in a trench, to just veer off a little. You're still on the road, but you veered off a little and now your wheel is in a groove and you can't get it out of the groove. You know you need to, but you're stuck in there.
Yeah.
Sometimes you literally need people to say, okay, here's a little ramp out. And sometimes those are therapists, sometimes they're friends, sometimes you don't get that for a long time. And if you're stuck in those ruts for too long, I think it can. I could see how it would feel like too much.
Absolutely. I mean, I've been there. I don't think I've ever been like clinically depressed, like actual, and I know people that have been that way.
Something that requires
medication or things like that. But I have been depressed.
Mm-hmm.
And the first time I felt it was when my dad died. I felt true. It was almost like a light went off in my head. And I'm like, oh, this is how it feels.
Yeah.
This is how people feel when they're like, when they almost can't see in front of themselves. When every step they take, it's just the next step.
Yeah.
It's like, it's almost as if there's a fog. You're kind of like living in this fog.
I got to survive today.
Yeah.
I got to just get through today somehow.
And sometimes it's, I got to get through this minute or this hour.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to be able to go to sleep and rest tonight and hopefully tomorrow will be better, all those things. But for me, it was just a few weeks. I had something to occupy my mind, luckily. But, I felt that.
Yeah.
And you have much more compassion, like you're saying, like when you feel that, you're like, okay, this is real. This is something that people have a real hard time getting out.
Yes.
Even
shaking,
even like the rut, like I can't even get out of this.
Yeah. And you start to see how habits and patterns play a big influence too.
Yeah.
Because
fills some of those voids for you. Whether they're good or bad habits, but voids have to be filled. There's a void there.
Yep.
So some people choose the bad voids or the bad things to fill it. Some people choose good things that turn into bad things.
Yep.
It's a balance of like,
I think a lot of that is lucky, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
It's based off of, I think, your current influence of people and opportunities presented to escape.
Yeah.
And when you accept an opportunity to escape that is maybe a negative one or can take you down that path, but you feel a sense of relief for a moment.
Yeah.
It's going to continue to ingrain that into you. And I feel, looking back on my dad's situation, I don't know how to directly correlate my personal issues with his death, or even if I should, but I definitely feel like there's been voids in my life that have been filled by both positive and negative influences, and they've both helped or hurt me,
Yeah, I agree 100%. I feel the same way when it comes to one of the things that bothers me, and we've talked about it before, is when people blame everything on the past.
Mm-hmm.
And so you and I struggle with that. We're always kind of like, yeah, the past sucked in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
But there's nothing I can do about it now. And I can't just let it completely take over my life.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have moments where you dip into that past and you let it kind of spin, kind of in that wheel. But at some point you look at it and you're like, I'm going nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
So I need to step back out because the past is the past. It's not going to do anything good for me.
Yep.
To dwell on it, to bring me down. Is there a way that I can take it and so it can bring me up?
I feel like I've been on that full spectrum of being so mad that my dad committed suicide, being sad, being embarrassed, feeling proud of my mom, feeling proud of our family, feeling, I mean, that the spectrum is so wide, and, you know, and other trauma can affect that as well. I think when I went through my divorce, I wanted to pile all of my trauma into one spot.
Yeah.
Say, hey, here's my big pile of trauma. How do I work through this? It's constant. It's never ending. I think as humans, we all go through trauma, and we're all trying to learn how to deal with it. It's not easy. And I know I still have a lot to learn. I still get sucked back in, and sometimes I feel fine. It's just a constant ebb and flow, I feel like.
Well, that's the thing that I think we don't give ourselves, is we don't allow ourselves to evolve more and more so. It's kind of like, I think it was, who's that comedian does Hot Pocket stuff? Gaffigan.
Oh, yes.
I think he has a bit where he talks about cooking something in a microwave and it taking, like a Hot Pocket takes like a minute and a half, and we're frustrated that it takes a minute and a half.
Yeah.
We take this little thing, and this may not be the joke, but we take this little frozen piece of goodness that's all wrapped up into like a little pizza bite for us that, years ago could never have. We put it in this box, and it's warm in a minute and 30 seconds. And we put it in, and we're like, oh, why is it taking so long?
Yes.
And we have a hard time allowing ourselves to say, this sucks, here's some good, this was bad. Now, I want to compile it all together, and my life should be fine.
Yeah. Hey, I was going to a therapist for a couple of years, right? I should be healed.
I'm fine.
It's not. I have a buddy who's a roommate of mine. He would always call it a tune-up. He'd say, I just need to go get a tune-up.
Yeah.
And I love that, because I think we give our bodies tune-ups, we give our cars tune-ups, we give our house a tune-up, we give all these things a tune-up, except for our brains. Like, I really like that philosophy of, hey, am I in a rut? Am I getting close to a rut? No, you're not. But, keep an eye on this and this and this.
Well, I think meditation, yoga, aside from, like the actual therapy, which is good, but things like that, we are actually sitting, thinking, and you're living in this space here. You're living in your head space, because we're constantly living outside of our head space.
Yes.
We're so uncomfortable with sitting and just being there and saying, I'm just going to let things come in my brain, and I'm going to let them go out. I'm just going to let things be
on its own.
On its own. I'm not going to push it in any direction. I'm just going to let it be.
Yeah.
I'm going to let the sad come in. I'm going to deal with that. I'm going to let the mad and the anger and the embarrassment, all those things, I'm just going to let them come in. And I'm going to just start pushing them out and moving them around. Sounds really easy, but it's one of those things where we have a really hard time doing that.
You got to practice it.
Just sitting.
I have a hard time with that.
I wanted to ask you about, most people cope with things like this with religion. Most people cope with stuff with spirituality. And I think it's a really good coping mechanism, because it allows you to say there's something bigger than me. It allows you to say maybe it's not over.
Yeah.
We'll
We'll see them again.
We'll see them again. Right. All that stuff. You have been all in religion and then all out.
Yeah.
And specifically, the LDS religion. And it's interesting to deal with, like, you know, something traumatic like that at a young age. But then as you start to grow, you know, you don't, like you said, you almost reset and don't deal with it. But then one of the things that we use is our religious background and culture and our spirituality to
lift our spirits.
Almost a crux sometimes, a way to get through things, which it's probably one of the best ways to do it. But I think also it can be.
I don't think it's bad to hope for it.
No.
You know, I hope for it. I hope that after this life, I can visit with my dad, with you, with my family, with all of my friends and family, right? I hope that. I don't know if I believe that that will happen.
Yeah.
But I guess we'll see, you know.
Well, talk to me about growing up in that faith. And then
that's what my mom did. You know, my dad passed away, and I don't really remember how deep we were in the church before he passed away. I assume we were pretty active.
Sure.
Although I do think I remember my dad being inactive. For some reason, I just remember him. I remember me wanting to stay home from church with him because he was staying home. And I was like, sweet, I get to stay home too. But that's it. It's just one really vague memory. So I don't really know how much weight to put on that. But when my dad passed away, my mom grabbed the church and she grabbed us. And basically that was it, right? So, hey, we're going to focus on this. And she went all in with church. And so did we. You know, we followed her. We went to church every week. We were in it.
Kind of the more orthodox.
Yes. Like going to the activities, going to the full meetings, dressing the part, doing all of the things on time, doing the scouts, doing young women's, doing, you know, you name it, taking the callings. I mean, it was all of it. It was all of it. And I saw some benefits to that. There's a very solid foundation there, I think, and it's like another home in a lot of ways. There's an extended family there. My mom talks a lot about that. She had some support.
It's a really good support group. Churches are a tremendous support group.
Yeah. And in so many ways, some of it's just friendships and some of it is more logistical.
Yeah.
Support. And so my life was really molded by that. You know, we were just in, and it was always something I thought about, always just something on the back of my mind. I was always going to do the mission. I was always going to, it was just it. It's just what I was going to do. It's just how I was living my life. And my sisters too, my mom.
Yeah.
And did it, you know, went on the mission.
Do you feel, I mean, we talk about being all in, like, were you, there's this thing in religion, in the main religions, like Catholicism, Judaism, maybe Islam, Mormonism, some of these religions that have a lot of Orthodox ties to it, where you're kind of measured by your knowledge of the faith, like, meaning I know that this is God's church. I know that I should be here. I know that he's directing it. I know that, you know, kind of all these I know things.
Yeah.
At that time, looking back now, do you feel like you knew that, like, in that space?
I knew as much as I knew how to know. And the reason why I say that is because ignorance was bliss in a lot of ways. I knew what I had been taught for years and years and years. Did I know? Did I have a testimony, as members of the church would say? Did I have this? No. I remember I didn't read the Book of Mormon before I went on my mission. I had read through it, been part of my lessons, all going to church. It wasn't just like something, oh, now I know zero about this church and I'm going on a mission. No, it wasn't like that. I was brought up in it my whole life, but
you knew
I
the
didn't
stories,
have that.
you knew the whole role in it, you know all the stuff.
I didn't have that conviction that I found out I needed when I got to the mission.
Yeah. In order to sell the product, you need to know actually the nuts and bolts of it.
Yes. So, I did. I took that challenge on myself. I was going to a Spanish-speaking mission, so they spoke two languages, Spanish and an Indian dialect, and I needed to learn both of those language, and I needed to learn the church too.
Yeah, what you're selling.
What I was selling. So I'm in the MTC learning and trying, and about day 3 or 4 came and I was done. I was like, no, I can't do this. I broke down. I had a girlfriend that I'd left that I was feeling sad about.
Yeah.
I had all my buddies out there doing stuff, hanging out, because I was one of the older ones. So I was one of the first ones gone. And just questioning it. Not the church or anything, but just like, do I really want to do this?
It's so funny because if people listen and they don't know anything about it, but most people that listen will know about kind of this cultural kind of experience that people have when they go on a mission.
Yeah.
It's, I would say more than half have this experience that you're having. Like I can't do this. I'm not, number one, I'm not good enough. I did too many things back at home that were not good.
You start questioning all your past sins, right? You're like, oh man.
And then you're like, I can't do this for 2 years.
Yeah.
I can't do all this stuff.
Yeah.
And whether it's like at the beginning or the middle or somewhere down the road, most of these now 18, 19, 20-year-old kids say, I can't do this.
Can do it. I think it's going to be even worse now because of phones. I think kids aren't going to be able to leave their phone behind.
It's true. But the thing they've changed is now they get to talk to their family, I think weekly. And they get to communicate more, which when we went out, it was twice a year. Mother's Day and Christmas, something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, and it was a complete life change for me as far as what I was actually doing with my day.
Yeah.
All of a sudden waking up at 6:30, going to bed at 10:30, praying about 400 times a day, studying pure scripture. I hadn't done that language. I was hanging with my buddies. We were playing video games and basketball
all day. I
had seminary like once, twice a week, and then church once a week. And that was my church experience. So going from that to the mission, it was a lot, but I stuck with it. I hung in there and loved my mission. Loved it.
Yeah.
I thought I got to just experience a whole nother culture and world.
I mean, you're just a boy from Utah.
Yeah.
That goes to a different country.
Yeah.
New language, new culture.
I dove into it. I said, okay, I'm going in. And I got to a point where I felt like I could say, I know.
Yeah.
I know that this is true. I know it, and I felt that at the time. And whatever people want to call the spirit, I felt like I had a couple of moments on my mission where I was feeling something.
Yeah.
And thought I would be all in my whole life.
Yeah.
I remember, emailing my family, like, how's everybody doing at the church? Keeping an eye on them. Hey, are we going to do Temple Day once a week when we get back? In.
You were one that probably came home and was like, I'm going to study every morning. I'm still going to get up and study.
Yes.
I'm still going to do
Lasted about 2 days.
Yeah.
And I was like,
I'm actually going to sleep in today because I don't have to get up at 6 a.m.
Yeah. what was trippy is so the day I get home, right, they set you apart, which was, I felt like a very spiritual experience. And then I go home, I go to bed.
You mean release you?
They release me.
Yeah.
Yes. So I'm not a missionary anymore. So I'm normal Brad now, right? Go home, go to bed, wake up. And it was like a dream because I woke up in the same bed that I had left 2 years before. Nothing had changed. I just woke up and all of a sudden I'm like, did that even happen? It was the trippiest thing. That was weird.
I actually feel similar to that. Yeah, I felt kind of similar.
Blur.
Well, and then you experience this phenomenon of everybody's lives progressed.
Mm-hmm.
Even though you progress as a person,
mm-hmm.
you didn't progress the same way that they did because you were gone. You come back,
right?
And you're like, I'm starting to square one again.
Yeah.
All these other people, your friends have jobs, or they have left. They're in college. They're doing this. They got married. They have a kid. They're doing all these things that are happening, and you're like, waking up in the same bed I left in as like a kid, and now I feel like a man.
Yeah.
And I'm starting over again.
It's a tough place to start from, honestly, because you feel like you have to make every life decision in that moment.
Right away.
Okay, I'm going to school. I got to find somebody to marry because that's what they're preaching to you. They got to do this and that. It was a lot.
For those that are listening, I have no idea what we're talking about, which is probably hardly any, but if you don't, LDS people go, not required, but what would you say? It's definitely encouraged and expected is probably a pretty good word, to go serve and proselyte the church all over the world for about 2 years.
Yeah.
And
it's full time.
So
every day.
You don't have jobs. You don't have anything else. That's what you're doing.
That's what you do.
From sun up to sundown,
you wake up, you study, you then do companion study, then you're out the door.
Yep.
You're out the door for 3 hours and you take a lunch for an hour and then you're back on it.
Yep.
Until dinner. And even dinner, then you got stuff after. And then you finally get home at 9:30.
Then you regroup.
And you do it all over again.
And regroup it all.
Try and get your appointment set up and whatever for the next day. Yeah.
And then you do it all over again. So it's a big commitment. I went and I had a portion of my family that, isn't, members of the LDS faith. And my dad especially said he didn't understand any of it, but said, he served in the military, and he's just like, I just kind of relate it to that. Yeah. Is that kind of what you're doing, son? Mm-hmm. I'm like, yeah.
It's pretty good.
That's kind of what it is, but it's like call it spiritual military or whatever.
Exactly.
And I remember my grandma kind of being disappointed and, just things like that.
Yeah.
So, okay. So then along this theme of being all in, at what point do you start to say, I don't know if this thing's for me, or was it like that? Or did you slowly start to say, I like this thing, but there's some things I don't like? Like where did you evolve?
I think it started a lot earlier than that. It started for me with a double life. And I think that started at a young age where I started to realize that in the church, you're a sinner when you're a member of the church. You just are. And you always got to be repenting and you always got to be doing this. Well, I started being curious as a boy, just getting into some of that stuff, getting into girls, getting into a little drinking, not a ton of drugs, but little stuff like that, experimenting.
And that's the thing, again, to premise it, Mormonism is in some cases very orthodoxy. Mm-hmm. I relate it to like Orthodoxy Judaism or real Orthodox Catholicism or Islam, things like that, where there is, I don't know, like a criteria to live by.
Yes.
If you don't live by that criteria, then, for whatever, however you want to parse it, you're considered not, what would you consider?
Not in good standing.
Not in good standing. And that might be it. Like, you're considered, whether or not it's self-implied,
right,
or if it's actually implied
yes,
by a church leader,
yes,
you're not in good standing. And so when a lot of people talk about this stuff, they talk about like what Brad, like what you're talking about is this double life, is where you're kind of navigating on this road of saying, like, I'm going to try a few little things here,
mm-hmm.
but knowing that this other side is saying that this divide starts to happen.
Yes. And initially started with, me feeling extremely guilty and going and confessing my sin to the bishop, and him giving me a set of guidelines and whatever, right? That's kind of how it started. And that's when I was 12 or 13. As you get older, you just ignore all that. You're just doing life, and you're going to cuss and you're going to check out girls and you're going to get offered a drink at a party. These are things in life that happen. And I figured out a way to get around that, was just to not tell anybody.
Yeah.
Focus on it myself. I can handle this problem. Right. And I think people do need to be able to handle their own shortcomings on their own. I was never taught how to do that.
Yeah. As
so
a young
compartmentalizing
person,
for me was a lot easier. Hey, I'll just put it in that bucket.
Yeah.
This is the bucket I'm working on.
Yeah.
And then I've got my main bucket here. This one's pretty good. I'm going to school, getting good grades, going to church every week, looking good there. You know what I mean?
And then when this bucket that I'm working on gets a little too full, I'm like, okay, I got to start doing a few things over here to lighten this load over here, because it's starting to impede on this load.
Yeah.
And it's starting to be too hard to balance.
Right. And I think everybody in some degree lives a double life.
So this is how I've always been convicted. Is that like I have a conviction, and we've talked about this. If you are not having those two buckets, you're not living, in my opinion, or being honest with yourself. In my opinion, as a Christian, there's only one perfect. And if you're thinking that you are going to be perfect, or you're in, I don't even like the idea of trying to be perfect, even though it's in Scripture.
Right.
But that, to me, minimalizes the fact that Jesus is perfect. Does that make sense?
It does, yes.
It's like everybody has that bucket, and everybody has things that really, really they're ashamed of, they don't like about themselves.
Yeah.
And you're supposed to.
And I think, going back to my dad, maybe that's where I learned to compartmentalize.
Absolutely. You learn the switch.
Hey, okay,
you learn the reset button.
I learned the reset button. So that compartmentalizing is not a good thing, I don't think. It's ultimately caused a lot of pain in my life and others' lives because that bucket got out of hand.
Well, let me ask you this. Do you think compartmentalizing is bad in a way where you aren't honest about that other bucket?
Yes.
That's what I think you're getting at.
Yes.
You weren't honest about the other bucket.
Exactly.
That other bucket was only your bucket.
Exactly.
And nobody else could see that bucket.
Exactly.
Because Brad in this bucket was perfect.
Yes. And this Brad can handle this bucket, right? Because he can figure this out.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's almost like when you lose a bunch of money at a casino, and you're like, I can get it back.
Let me go back and get some more.
Let me go to the ATM and get a little more. And you go pay like an $8 ATM fee to get $100. Because you're like, I'm just getting 100.
Yeah. Just
$100 because I can turn that into 300.
Yep.
Because I did already, and then I lost it all. So you go pay $8 to get $100, and you lose it in like 2 or 3 hands.
Yes.
You're done, back to square one.
Yes.
It's the same kind of play. You're not, and you know what? A lot of times, and if you've ever done this, you know what I'm talking about. A lot of times, say you're with your buddies or you're with stuff, you go to the ATM by yourself, And you don't tell anybody that you went and got
Exactly.
another $100 out.
Yes.
And then you sit down, you play, and then everybody kind of convenes at the end, like, how'd you do? And I'm like, oh, I'm down like $100. Not
Yeah.
too bad, but really you're down 300.
Yes.
And the, $30 you paid in to get that
Yes.
money.
I know.
But that's the bucket.
That's the bucket.
You're afraid to let that bucket out.
Yeah. And you're ashamed of the bucket. You're embarrassed by the bucket. And ultimately, you don't want anybody to know about this bucket.
So when did the bucket for you become too big and overwhelming that you're like, it's too much. I can't do it anymore?
Started with my divorce. I was doing some things I shouldn't have been doing, ultimately. And my ex-wife found out. I had ultimately confessed to her because I had to, essentially. And that just kind of started a snowball effect in my life. It was another trauma point in my life. And I think life sprouts from trauma. And I don't mean that in like a really positive way. I'm just saying that change happens with trauma. So as part of my messing up, I had to go talk to the church, tell them what I had done, give them the opportunity to judge me and decide what they wanted to do with my standing, which ultimately they decided to X me out. So
just quickly, what was that like? Did it mean much to you? Because these two buckets just kind of, like you said, just exploded in your face.
Yeah.
And then you're like, okay, there's a lot of stuff here that needs to be handled and a lot of just crap.
A lot of crap to handle. Yeah.
So was that a big deal to you at the time because you're kind of dealing with all that?
It was interesting. I think I had started and my ex and I had started to have some conversations about where we were at with the church because we had just gone through the motions our whole marriage. And
did she grow up in the LDS faith?
She did. She grew up, her parents, one was in, one was out.
Mm-hmm.
So she had a good background for being open-minded in that regard.
Some balance.
Yeah. In hindsight, she probably would have been a good person to be open to about my doubts in the church. But again, this bucket was so defended and protected and walled up that I wasn't in a place to do that.
There was too much in the bucket.
Too much. So,
but if initially you were like, hey, here's my bucket right here.
Yeah.
I just want you to know.
Yeah.
There could be some salvaging there, but
exactly.
Like you were saying, once it gets too much, then it's just
too much. Yeah. So, it was intense. It's a process. You have to go, you meet initially with your bishop, and then he's got someone above him if it's too much. And then if it's above that guy, then he's got a group of people.
He's got to make a phone call.
You got to make a call.
Right? All right. This one's a lot.
We got some stuff going on here. I know.
Oh, that's the thing.
It was wild, man. So, I mean, and it's intense. I was one guy and I laid it out there. At this point, my buckets were both empty. They were both exposed.
Yeah.
I didn't care anymore. I did not give a rip anymore. It was probably, in some regards, a bad thing for some people because I was maybe too open about my life. But I was just sick of it. I was sick of holding it all in. So when it let it all out, it was nice. And part of that was kind of like a hope that the church didn't want me anymore. It was kind of like, I hope they don't just slap me or whatever. I hope this is a done deal so that I can start over again, hit a reset button again.
So they ultimately said, no for you.
You out.
You're out.
Yep.
And
a big part of that was because of how deep I was in.
Yeah.
I had done it all.
Yeah.
I knew all the stuff. All the stuff.
All the protocols.
Everything you got to do to get there, So that's a big reason. They say, you knew all this and yet you did all this.
Saying. So for context, in the church, once you've how do you explain this? Once you've done certain things like go on a mission and and have certain callings, and just kind of, once you've climbed the ladder enough, I guess you could call it.
They call them ordinances, but essentially, since you're started 8 years old, that's your first ordinance of baptism. Yeah. You go all the way up until marriage, which is the last.
Yeah, that's like the sealing, essential pinnacle portion of like I don't know, the outward signs that you're willing to follow God and keep his commandments and do things.
You are faithful.
You're faithful to his teachings, and once you do that, you're held to a higher standard.
Yes.
It's like an older child.
I get it.
It's like an older child.
I get it. Yes.
My 6-year-old is not held to the same standard as my 13-year-old.
Yes.
They're held to different standards. Mm-hmm. And so you're held to a different standard, and they say, okay, because you're held to a different standard.
See you later.
See ya. And
we hope the best for you.
And it wasn't, like you said,
not here's your tithing money back. Not that would have been nice.
Just a quick parting gift.
God doesn't want this anymore because you weren't faithful while you were giving this to us. So
it's kind of like the thing, do people that win the lottery, is tithing good? And like,
I know. Yeah.
Or say you like
get a tithing on gambling. Yeah. Exactly.
I don't think they wouldn't take it.
Yeah.
I don't think so you were out.
That was it. I was out. And the hardest part of it was calling my mom and telling her the news.
And she's an Orthodox Mormon.
She is. She's devout.
Faithful, extremely good person. She
is a saint, and that was hard.
So this goes into this weird, and I don't want to call it weird because I don't want to diminish it, but I come from a different background, and so I don't feel this like you do, or a lot of people in the faith, where we were just talking about this, where you relate essentially coming out of the church or leaving the church. Yours is more significant because now you're no longer accepted in the church. You're actually, they call it excommunicated. You're done. Yep. It's really hard for people to talk to their parents or to the people, their family.
I love golf, so I relate it to Tiger Woods. I don't know if anybody's watched the documentary that HBO came out with, but his dad, from the time he was born, basically is like, here's a golf club in your hands. You're playing this.
And he idolized his dad too.
I feel like the church in a lot of ways was that for me. This is it. This is the roadmap. This is your life right here. And when I had to cut ties with it, imagine Tiger telling his dad, I'm not going to play golf anymore. It just wasn't going to happen. I mean, I could hear heartbreak, and it was brutal. I mean, it was brutal. And for her,
not as much for you. It was harder for you. It was harder for you telling her.
I had gotten to the point where I was okay just telling people now. And so for me, I was kind of in this space of liberty, of freedom. Like, hey, this is what I've done, and I'm sorry. And here you go, but other people felt the consequence of my actions at different times in different ways. And that was a big lesson I learned, is
that there's a ripple.
I always thought my bucket was my bucket.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize what damage I was going to cause to people around me. And that's the hardest thing, I think, is being responsible for somebody else's trauma and somebody else's hurt.
So how did she react? Did you call her on the phone and tell her?
Called her right
after? Just because you wanted to shed that? You're like, it's fresh.
I knew she was wanting to know.
Oh, because she knew where you were going.
Yes.
She knew the process, of course.
It's called a disciplinary council.
Yeah.
So, hey, you're coming in because you messed up.
Yeah.
So she knew when and where, and
you felt like she was expecting a call.
I don't know if she was wanting or expecting, but I think she was just over there biting her nails and like, what is going on? And I told her I felt good about the decision, but I don't think she did. I think she was hoping that I would have stayed in it and worked on it.
So, yeah, but at that point, you didn't have a choice.
I didn't have a choice.
And I think maybe, so after that, so maybe this is the route. Like after that, you're like, okay, I'm kind of done with this for a while.
Yeah.
Because most, I want to say most because I don't know that situation very well, but when you're in that situation, the goal, I guess, would to return back, right?
Sure.
I'm sure that's what they talk to you about, like things like that. Like the goal is to return back.
Yeah.
And then you telling or conveying to your mom that you're okay with it and you felt like it was the right thing and all these things. That's probably what's more painful than.
Yeah.
Like I think, I don't know what conversation you had, but in some cases, like just saying like, if you were to say, "Hey, mom, I'm coming back. I'm going to work on all this stuff, all these things,"
it gives her hope.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I just wasn't there. And at this point, I was sick of lying.
Yeah.
So I was just brutally honest and just said, "Hey, I need a break from this, and I don't know when or if I'll be back, but I'm letting you know that I'm not in, and
You're not in mentally or spiritually, and you're actually not in.
And I'm not in.
Like they won't allow you.
This isn't something that like, oh, I'm going to go to church next week and sit in the back and try and work back to, no. For me, it was like, okay. It was just a good opportunity to
reset.
You
got this reset thing going on.
Yes.
So it was a reset.
Yes.
So fast forward. I mean, it's hard because we talked about this, especially when it comes to religion and more Orthodox religions. People are always trying to get you back.
Yeah.
You kind of feel that. Family's always like trying to get you back.
Yeah.
But do you ever see yourself?
Not right now. I'll never say never.
You say, that's interesting because you're different than a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where you and I are alike, because we don't like absolutes and we don't like saying never. It's never going to happen.
I've said never before and it hasn't been true. So,
but it for all intents and purposes, never is pretty true to you, but you'll never close that door.
Yeah. I mean, it's opened up a whole nother Pandora's box of philosophy and thought on life and where we're at and what we're doing.
To the point now where it's hard for you to even believe that like God's like there.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
We talked about that.
Or at least, what I thought God was all along. Yeah. I don't know if I believe that anymore. And it continues to evolve. My thoughts do, my philosophies do. The only thing that's, I do feel like there's something outside of this planet that is also life. And I don't know what that is. And so I'll leave room in there for whatever that might be. Maybe there's a higher intelligence somewhere else in space that has affected our world and created religion. Maybe it's God direct from the heavens. I don't know. But I definitely think there's life outside of this planet. As far as how it correlates to like a God and all of that, I don't know.
Yeah, to go back to what we were talking about, just believing that there's life beyond this is comforting.
Yeah.
When you've lost somebody. And in more traditional Christian religions, you believe that there's life after, and that you'll be reunited with those people that have passed before you. And it's a very comforting thought. It's something that we were talking about at the very beginning, where Do you know that? Man, it's really hard.
Knows a strong word.
Yeah. And I deal with that a lot in terms of, the faith.
Mm-hmm.
I find myself a lot thinking, do I know these things?
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard when society is so divided now and there's so many things out there. That's why it's hard for me to be so absolute on a lot of things, because you have to be open to evolving and evolution and things. You have to be open, in my opinion. That works for me, is to just be open about stuff,
Yes.
because I feel like you get burned if you're not open. At least I feel like I've been burned when I'm not open.
Yes.
It hurts more when you're convicted so much in a particular thing, and you start to see that kind of erode by maybe becoming old, just experience or wisdom or whatever you want to call it.
Yep.
It hurts more.
Yeah.
And so being able to be a little bit more open to things evolving makes me feel better.
I think a lot of people that leave the church tend to go that route first. I'm kind of a little bit different. I think I was excommunicated from the church, and just kind of a bomb went off in my life, and that was a part of it. A lot of people go through, their doubts in religion and their doubts in God, and kind of get into it that way. And that seems tough, because something you've been taught your whole life, now you're trying to disprove it. And I don't know, it just seems kind of like rabbit holes everywhere galore. But
this goes back to my thought of giving yourself a break. Remembering, when it comes to Christianity at least, remembering that there's one perfect. It's not you. It's not leaders. It's none of these kind of man-made institutions, for lack of a better kind of word. If you're a Christian, you kind of look towards God and Jesus as those perfect beings. So inevitably, it opens up. It opens up evolution and fallibility. Things not being totally what you thought they were.
Yeah. And
so I'm okay with that, but a lot of people aren't.
I mean, you look at, if you believe in Christ and his apostles, there was disbelief with even the apostles. So I just, and that was direct from Christ's mouth. And these guys still, shortly after, start to not believe.
They just went back to the same old thing.
Yes.
They just went back to fishing.
So you put a bunch of humans in charge of this stuff. And I think there's gotta be some.
Okay. So a question for you then, just a couple questions here on that, philosophy wise. Do you think there is good and evil then? Like, is there a balance? Because a lot of people nowadays talk about that there's a big kind of push against good. There's a bigger side of evil than we've ever seen. There's a lot of bad people.
I don't know. I don't think so. I think we like to look at people in generalities. So we'll say, people who drink are bad. Or, if, the Al-Qaeda, right? But I dive a little deeper. Where were those guys? Who were they raised by? What was their situation? And why do they believe this? They have a belief just like you have a belief.
Yeah.
And I'm not giving them room to kill people. I'm not saying that. That's wrong. I do think.
Sure, there's bad, there's wrong.
And ultimately what I've kind of figured out is like, are your actions hurting other people, probably bad. If they're not, I'm not going to judge you.
Neutral.
Yeah.
Kind of neutral ground.
Everything that's dictated right or wrong has been dictated by man-made stuff.
Yeah.
And I think there's so many versions to how that could have gone throughout the years that we're just where we're at. You know, I mean, we've seen things evolve in our short amount of time with anything. I mean, whatever you look at, you know.
I mean, in terms of women's rights and racism and just things that we nowadays today don't see that much.
Yes.
And you think, wow, I can't believe that stuff happened.
Yeah. Women weren't able to vote.
Yeah.
But back then, that's not a wrong or right. This is right. You know, this is just how it's supposed to be. So
Black people are just second-rate citizens.
It's ridiculous.
It's crazy to think about that now. And thank goodness racism is at a very low point. It seems like it's kind of, I don't know. People are talking about it a lot now, but it's crazy to think that that's how it was.
I think I'm starting to believe more and more in sphere of influence. Mm-hmm. And we do have choice in this life. Every day we make choices, but our sphere of influence really guides our choices. And if a child grows up in Al-Qaeda, how can you convince him that he's doing it wrong, that he's a bad person? And I don't even think you can. I don't even think you should. You know,
I think we're hyper quick to deem everything as good or bad. Like
judge.
We say, if you believe this or agree with this or do that, then you're bad. Mm-hmm. And I think I don't know, I'm kind of at a place now where when it comes to politics and just society, how we're just so quick to say the other side is bad and evil. Mm-hmm. That is evil. That person is evil. I'm like, well, kind of like what you're saying. I believe there are bad people.
Yes.
I believe there's evil out there. I believe that there's, maybe you call it a dark side and a light side. There are bad people. There are people that choose to do bad things.
So, you know, I've been deep into Netflix, and one of the things that I binge on are those serial killer documentaries. Because I'm always intrigued where they started.
Where they get.
Yeah. Yeah. And it sounds really bad, but you can see their bucket of crap that they're putting in there. And mental health, I think, plays a part of it. I think a lot of them were abused themselves. It's just a vicious cycle. And I think that's really more where we need to go. We need to start saying, how do we start breaking some of these cycles?
Yeah.
How do we start getting people going in a better direction? So, okay, you are a descendant of this. You were in this influence for 25 years, and now you're coming out into kind of a bigger world and a more open society. How can we don't have those things in place to really help with that. You know, it's just going to kind of keep churning, especially as the world population continues to grow. It's just going to keep churning.
I think just as civilized societies, generally, like what you said, if you're hurting other people, then that's bad.
Yeah.
And so these serial killers and these people that do horrible things, you know, the child sex trafficking and the just trafficking of people and just the terrible things that happen in this world. I think what you're getting at is recognizing that it's bad, it's terrible, it should never happen. Those people should not be able to roam the earth freely and all those things.
Exactly.
But what you're saying is there's something in there. There's a soul in there. There's a human in there. Like what happened? So the study of figuring out what happened.
Yes.
And how can we help? How can we help? Maybe not that person because they've made their choices. They've done their things. Mm-hmm. But how do we disrupt the cycle on maybe some other? How do we see the signs for other people?
Yeah.
And how do we disrupt that?
Yeah. And we're getting smarter and better.
I think
at
we
it.
are. And same like with poverty and kind of that systemic kind of poverty train that sometimes happens where it's generational.
Yep.
How do we disrupt that in a good way? Is it just continually giving? I don't know. Is it a hand out or is it a hand up? Is it all these things? And like you said, I think we're probably getting better at that kind of stuff.
Yep.
But the thing that's problematic is when we say that those things are evil. I mean, maybe we just, like you said, in my opinion, there are evil things. So how do we call things bad and evil
without judging
and make them stick? Well, it's kind of like when you say everything is a priority, then nothing's a priority.
Yeah.
When you say everything is evil or bad,
it. Yep.
when it doesn't fit in kind of your purview, then nothing is.
Yeah.
Because you're diluting the evil and the bad.
Yeah.
So how about we just call things that are actually truly evil and bad, like trafficking kids or rapists or all these things that are really bad, murderers, all these things that like, okay, we can definitively say that's bad.
Yeah.
But can we say that helping people that are economically disadvantaged is evil or bad because they need to pull themselves up by the bootstraps? Maybe we stop there and say, we don't know where they came from. We don't know their circumstance.
Exactly. I mean, that's it. We're all individuals. And so each individual needs their own special case ultimately. And we just don't have the infrastructure or the power to do that. And so we do blanket it.
So that's the structure of religion. Yep. That's the structure of Christianity. There is one power that can ultimately judge. And so that's why people flock to a higher purpose or power or religion, because they know that there is bad out there.
Yeah.
They know that there's actually really bad things like we're talking about. And the hope is that will be reconciled by something beyond us.
Because higher power.
Because we can't do it.
Yeah.
We cannot reconcile it here.
Yeah.
So that's where Christianity comes in, or any form of religion comes in to say, this is our catalyst to reconcile those things.
Yeah, this is how you can be forgiven.
Yeah.
And I like the idea of forgiveness. I think instead of going to a person like a God to ask for forgiveness, I think you should go to the individual person that you harmed and ask for forgiveness. I think that'd be more powerful and probably more therapeutic versus, hey, please forgive me. I did this and this. I'll try not to do it again. Okay, thanks, God. Okay, now I'm good. Doesn't hit.
I think in traditional Christianity or in religion, you're supposed to do both.
Right.
But it doesn't always happen. I don't know.
No, it doesn't. That's okay. It's whatever.
I mean, it is what it is.
It is what it is. Yeah, people are going to do their thing. And that's the thing, is that's all right. You know.
Let me ask you this crazy, crazy thing. Are you happier now?
Yes.
That's a crazy question, because in orthodoxy religions, when you leave, there's no way you can be happy. And I say that kind of loosely because, I'm kind of poking the bear, but like,
sure.
But a lot of people, if you leave your faith, can you be happy?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think for me, it's more living an authentic life that's creating the happiness. I'm not saying that.
You wouldn't necessarily pin it on the religion saying they
correct.
made me or it made me unhappy.
Right.
But
I feel happier now with myself because I feel like I'm more authentic and more real and not trying to portray one picture and really be doing another.
Mm-hmm.
So that's probably it.
This is something I talk about a lot, especially with my kids. And I think this is maybe one of the reasons why is because you're just being honest with yourself.
Yeah.
And that's where the authentic comes from.
Yeah.
When we stop being honest with ourselves, I mean, like we said, there's always your little bucket.
Sure.
You're working on.
Yeah.
That may be the closest people, maybe your wife, your spouse or your partner or whoever it is knows.
Mm-hmm.
But you should be able to lay your pillow down at night and at least be able to reconcile most things.
Yeah.
And be able to say, okay, I'm being, I'm giving myself a percentage that I'm a B.
Yeah.
I'm a B plus
I had a
for being honest to
day-to-day.
myself.
I do find that being out of religion, I judge myself less.
Interesting.
I was always judging myself and I was always messing up. And then that would create a little more guilt. And then it was just a cycle of judging myself constantly. And so now, kind of throwing that all out the window, now I'm caring less what other people think of me, which is great too.
Do you think you're a better person? Like, do you think you treat people better?
I think I treat people about the same.
Okay.
I think at my core, I'm my same person. Just, I was making a lot of bad decisions, making a lot of bad mistakes that ultimately hurt a lot of people, But as far as just who I am as a person, pretty much the same person. It took me a while to kind of get back to that after leaving the church, going through the divorce and kind of resetting.
Mm-hmm.
It took me a while to kind of get back into normal, find myself, really get back to be okay with myself and just start to work on that from there.
This is where I'm at. This is where I'm
going
to start from here instead of starting from where I want to be.
Yeah.
Or starting from where I was.
Where I thought I'd be.
Yeah. I'm just going to start from today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I noticed that. I have a lot of friends that have kids. I don't. My wife and I don't. Yet. Maybe it's in the cards for us. Maybe not.
I just don't know why you don't have kids yet. I just think it's, I know, right? I just,
we have three dog kids.
And you just use your dogs as your kids. You just don't have any kids.
I know.
You can't ever live a fulfilling life without kids, Brad.
Exactly. So, I feel like life definitely had to readjust, and it took a while.
Here's the other thing I think about too is I think we'll have to readjust again.
Yeah.
Where we're at today, for anybody that's been through some hard stuff, you do understand that there's more of that on the horizon.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
Like you say, okay, it's I've seen that. I know what it feels like. It hurts, it burns, and I'm not immune to it.
Yeah. We all get touched eventually, whether it's death or divorce or losing a job or the list goes on, right?
Yeah. Traumatic diseases or cancer or
same way we hit highs. So there's times in life that things are going well.
I kind of feel like there's this idea that we should be happy all the time.
Yes.
And I just disagree.
Yeah, me too.
I'm generally optimistic. I think you are too, but I kind of have changed my thought thinking that happiness, I don't know. We're consistently striving for whatever it is that makes us happy without recognizing that it's not always happy. Sometimes it's just neutral.
You get those moments.
Yeah.
You get those moments where you're like, this is sweet.
Yeah.
And I don't know what that is. If it's having a child in that moment, I've heard so many times, this is a moment like, wow. Seeing a beautiful sunset. Wow.
Yeah.
And it's a moment to pause and kind of, I like that. I appreciate that.
It's the small wins that bring the
Small wins.
happiness.
Yes.
It's the little things.
But as many of those as you're going to have, you're also going to have them the other way.
Yeah.
Or this person cut me off, and now I'm a little frustrated, or I'm running late, so now I'm feeling anxiety, and that's just how we ebb and flow through our whole day. It's not a perfect happiness, it's not a perfect sadness. It's just an ebb and flow of trying to do something. I think that's ultimately where I end up at the start of every day, is like, what are we going to do today to do something positive, do something progressing?
Upward mobility is how I always think about it. Is there a way to just have some sort of upward mobility?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've made plenty of mistakes in life. I've hurt people. I've offended people. I'm sure I've wronged people. As has everybody.
Yeah.
But I can't just continually just sit with that. I got to have upward mobility.
Yep.
Got to have, even in the lows, the ability to get out of the low.
Something to work towards, something to even as simple as putting something on the calendar as, an activity.
Absolutely.
Gives purpose.
So then, to conclude, how do you, as normal everyday Joes, get through hard things?
Without religion?
Without religion.
We just went through something really, really hard. Oof. And it's been, I've seen it play out with everybody involved, kind of everybody's coping mechanisms.
Yeah.
I think I'm just more present in the moment and more aware of how is this moment impacting. My brother-in-law passed away, is what I'm referring to, of COVID. And he left behind his wife, my sister, and two kids, not little, 16, 13. And my sister is, the church is helping. I think I'm seeing that, and I appreciate that, and I love that for her. Her son is not really involved with the church at all, so he's kind of having to navigate this on his own.
Was Dad into it?
No.
Okay.
So, I've been to lunch with him a few times and talked to him, but I think for me, what I've taken from this trauma is I'm not fluffing anybody. I'm not saying, hey, it's going to be okay, because, in a couple of years, just before you know it, we're all going to be together and we're going to be a happy family and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
I'm not even going there.
Because it sucks. There's nothing.
Okay, great. Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah. 60 years from now, whatever.
Yeah. Right now. Yeah.
Somebody came up to me and told me about my dad. I'd be like, whatever, dude. I don't even know him. So what's the point? But I think being present, feeling it, being aware of your feelings, acknowledging them, knowing that it's not going to last a day or a week or a month. This is going to be an ongoing thing in your life. And just being a little bit more honest with yourself about it, with the reality of it. What's the reality of this? And how can we work through the reality of the situation versus, well, you'll see him again one day. Yeah. So congratulations.
But maybe to your point is, what are you going to do today?
What are you going to do today?
How are you going to live today? Because for many people that have lost people, it's really easy to just say, like you said, well, I'll see him again. Mm-hmm. Well,
and go to church, because now I got to go to church and make sure that I'm good so that I can see him again. I think, specifically with my nephew, understanding he can't understand what he's going through now, but I can in some ways. So I'm trying to coach him, or not coach him, but tell him, hey,
Tips, advice,
tips,
whatever.
hey, dude, things that you don't think about. Kids at school are going to be jerks. They don't know how to talk about it. You're going to feel sad, happy, depressed, angry. You're going to feel it all. It's going to last a long time. Know that you've got support if you ever need to talk. Those things, but I don't know. Maybe that's.
But I'm more like, feel like you, but at the end of the day, it's just something you have to deal with. There's no way to sugarcoat it, in my opinion. And I'm sure a good counselor and a psychologist and people would know how to better kind of walk through it. But in my opinion, no matter what anybody says, it's still, kind of what we're talking about. When people say, I think Ben. I did a podcast with Ben. He lost his kid at like 7 months, and he said one of the things that bothered him is people say, "Well, she's in a better place." Mm-hmm. He's like, "Well, what are you talking about? With her family and her parents is in a better place?" And like, what do you mean?
Yeah,
and it's kind of the same thing. It's easy to tell people, "Well, he's in a better place now." Well, is he in a better place for his wife and his 2 kids?
No.
Yeah, it's not. I can't.
And
I can't
probably
get behind
not
that.
For him.
Yeah, I can't get behind that. But again, I don't know what's going on the other side. I don't know what's there. I have no idea.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know what it feels like over there. I've never been there.
It's all assumptions.
And so I'm not going to pretend like I understand it, but I sure in the heck can say with my finite mind now, it's better here than there.
Yeah.
And so in so many words, it just sometimes just sucks.
Life sucks sometimes.
Yeah.
It's hard. We can make it harder on ourselves sometimes. We can make it easier on ourselves sometimes. And
the only thing I would say is trying to search for the little wins, like the little things.
Yeah.
That make you happy.
Yep.
Because going back to you talking about filling those voids with that kind of bucket that you don't want anybody to see. Mm-hmm. When you start putting the things in that bucket that maybe you're ashamed of, or that you're not proud of, or things like that, that's maybe when it becomes counterproductive.
Exactly.
I don't know what you think about that, but I think that's the part that, like, how do you try to find the little wins?
That's it. I mean,
how do you stay present, like you're saying? How do you stay present going down the road?
It's hard. It's hard nowadays to stay present. I think there's so much attention grabbing stuff out there. Something for me, I've got 2 things in particular. One is taking the dogs for a walk. It's a good decompression time, a good time to kind of be with my own thoughts or listen to podcast or
some music or just something.
Just some downtime.
Yeah.
And then the other is golf. Golf for me is a way to relax, even though it's a stressful game.
Not for you because you're so good. Well, some of the best things in the world, in my world and probably your world, is putting some headphones and at the range.
Yeah.
And just doing your thing.
Yeah.
Or just being on a golf course, or, for me with my family and just watching a movie on a Sunday afternoon.
Yes.
Just chilling. Doing nothing.
Yep.
The little things. And then knowing and understanding that the bad things are there, mm-hmm. and they're going to come back, yep. and they're going to hit you. They're going to blindside you.
Yep.
They're going to mess with you, and they're going to suck. But for me, is just finding the small little wins. Where can you find some of those here and there?
Yep. Small wins every day.
A drive in a car for me is something I've done since I turned 16. Put some music on and just 15, 20 minutes of driving a car. I can flip my mood pretty quick.
Oh yeah, that's some of the best.
You know what I mean? Nobody with me.
Just
Put some music on, take a drive, and it could be sad. It could be. I've had tear-filled moments of driving in the car with some music.
Me too.
And it could be sad, but you can live there.
You can feel that,
and then you can kind of.
It's true. It's effective. You know, music's a big one because it's emotional. So connecting to those emotions that you're feeling through music can be helpful too. Help you express it if you don't know how to express it.
Something that I don't do very well that I think I'm trying to learn is just talking to people that you trust, people closest to you.
Yeah.
I think that's good that I don't do a lot of. You know what I mean? But just talking to people when you're going through stuff. There's some people out there that go through really hard times, like your dad.
Mm-hmm.
Like, would things be different? It's always easy to armchair things if you could go talk to somebody.
Yeah.
Some of the things that I miss about having a father around, things like that. I mean, I had a great stepdad. Is just being able to talk to that person and get in their head. And so sometimes if we just talk to people we trust, I think that can be therapeutic.
That's big time. You know,
opening up, being vulnerable is hard. It's scary because we don't want rejection.
I think that's a skill that I'm still working on, but started to develop through, divorce and leaving the church and therapy and just talking to people and being honest and open. And if they didn't like it, then okay, they didn't have to deal with me, and vice versa. You know, I had to remove myself from some areas of influence that didn't always have my best interests in mind. So making those adjustments is, I think, very important as well. Putting yourself in a position to feel positivity is really, really important. It's easy to continue, especially right now during quarantine, to put yourself in a down, dark, hideaway spot, and I think it's creating some issues.
Well, I always think of put yourself in a position to thrive, whatever that thriving is, whatever it looks like to you, whatever. And when I say thrive, doesn't mean like you're a rock star. It just means for yourself to thrive a little bit.
I feel like, my wife now has provided that for me because we're able to just be ourselves.
Yeah.
And we don't judge each other. And so having that person that I can just say, hey,
your bucket's pretty open.
My bucket's pretty open. And hers is too. And doesn't mean that we're just off dinking around all day, but we accept each other.
And you've grown up, and we all have, those buckets are different now than what they used to be like for everybody.
Yeah.
All right. Let's close this up here.
Thank you for having me.
Just